Marvin Gay Sr. outlived his son by 14 years. He died in a nursing home in 1998 at the age of 84. The quiet, natural death he had denied his son the day before his 45th birthday. Nobody who knew both of them has ever found a clean way to explain what that means. The story of April 1, 1984 has been told many times. The argument, the gun, the hospital, the death. What has been told less often is the 60 years before it. Who Marvin Gay Sr. was, what shaped him, what he carried, and how the man who raised one of the most beloved voices in American music came to be the man who ended it. Marvin Gay Sr. was born in 1914 in Lexington, Kentucky. He came to Washington, D.C. as a young man, where he found his way into the House of God Church, a denomination that occupied an unusual position in American religious life, practicing certain Old Testament observances alongside Pentecostal tradition. He became a minister.
He built his life and his identity around that role, and around the specific authority that ministerial identity provided in the community it served. The household he built in Washington was governed by that authority. His wife Alberta and their 4 children lived under a discipline that people who knew the family from the outside described as severe, and that the children, in the accounts they gave in later years, described as something worse than severity. The beatings were documented. The inconsistency of what provoked them was documented. The gap between the man who preached on Sunday and the man who moved through the house the rest of the week was documented, and was wide enough that people who saw only the public version had no conception of the private one. There was another dimension to Marvin Gay Sr. that his family maintained as a private matter for decades. He wore women's clothing at home. This was known to his wife and children, and to no one outside that household for most of his life. What it meant to him, how he understood it, how he reconciled it with the ministerial identity that organized everything else about his public self, he never addressed in any form that has survived. What it produced in the household was a specific kind of pressure, a secret of considerable weight held inside a family already organized around the management of a violent and unpredictable authority. Marvin Gay Jr. grew up inside all of this. The beatings, the secrets, the specific terror of a household where the rules changed without warning, and the consequences of violating them were physical. And alongside the terror, the music, the choir, the instrument, the voice that Alberta recognized and encouraged, and that Gay Sr. never once validated in any form that his son could feel. People have asked, over the years, what Gay Sr. thought of his son's career.
The record is sparse. He did not attend concerts. He did not speak publicly about the music in ways that acknowledged its significance. The people who knew the family described his position toward Marvin's success with careful language, not pride, not opposition exactly, but a kind of refusal to engage with it as real, as if the thing his son had built, the audience of millions, the records that shaped American popular music, existed in a register that Gay Sr. had decided, at some point, was not accessible to him. The relationship between them in the later years was the relationship it had always been, with additional layers. Marvin moved back into his parents' house in late 1983. The reasons were financial, personal, desperate, the collapse of everything that the Midnight Love comeback had briefly made look stable.
He was living in a room in a house with a man who had never approved of him, who had beaten him as a child, who was aging and volatile and carrying whatever the weight of his own life had accumulated into. And there was the brain tumor, the meningioma pressing on the frontal lobe, discovered only after the shooting. The tumor does not explain 60 years of what came before it, but it was present in those final months, doing what that kind of pressure on that region of the brain does, removing the buffer between impulse and action. The night of March 31, 1984. An argument. Marvin attacked his father, physically, severely, in ways that people who were present described as the release of something that had been building for decades. Gay Sr. was injured. The house went quiet. The next morning, Gay Sr. entered Marvin's bedroom with a gun. The charge was first-degree murder. It was reduced to voluntary manslaughter after the tumor discovery. He received a suspended sentence and probation. He was divorced by Alberta after 49 years of marriage. He moved into care. He died in 1998. He gave one interview of substance after the sentencing, from which the most quoted line is the one in which he said he would not have done it if he had known what he was doing. People have parsed that sentence for 40 years. It is either a statement about the tumor, that the meningioma had removed the capacity for rational decision-making in the moment, or it is something else, the acknowledgement, however indirect, that what he did cannot be accounted for by any framework that describes a father shooting his son as something other than what it was. The children he left behind carried different versions of this. Alberta was divorced from him, but outlived him by only a few years. Frankie, who had gone to Vietnam, who had come home changed, who had provided the letters that became What's Going On. Frankie carried the family story forward in a way that has not been fully told in any public forum. There is a version of Marvin Gay Sr. that is simply a villain, the abuser, the killer, the man who took the voice away. That version is accurate as far as it goes. What it does not account for is the weight of his own life, what he came from, what he built, what he could not face, what the tumor was doing in those final months. None of that justifies anything. But a story that reduces him entirely to the gun in his hand on April 1, 1984, is a story that does not account for how a person becomes capable of something like that. Which means it is a story that does not account for the thing at all. Marvin Gay Sr. died in a nursing home in 1998. He was 84. He had outlived Marvin by 14 years. He had outlived Alberta. He had outlived the label that made his son famous. He never, by any account, adequately explained it. He lived with it for 14 years in ways that nobody outside that nursing home fully knows. The voice was gone. The man who ended it lived on. That is the fact of it. Quiet, unresolved, still without a clean ending, even now.